Right, so I'm back again with another video. It's not a review this time, a little bit more of an informative video again. Now, I've uploaded a couple of videos this morning and yesterday. Basically my reviews of the silver dollar snuff. I've been asked by quite a few people what snuff is, why people take it, and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I did write an article back in October 2010. Bloody hell. Where I was invited on to the local radio station to do a talk about snuff. I'll stick a link to the original radio article, the original article I did. You can find that in the description at the bottom. But I'm quickly going to go over a little bit of the information I took with me, and I've got a couple of references from a couple of my books out of my tobacco library that I would like to quote to you as well. So please bear with me. I look down. All this is written on my tablet, but like I say, I will give you the link for this original article on here. So just to go over the history of snuff first. It was first discovered by the Europeans on Columbus's voyage to the Americas in 1497. Now, if I just get the gentleman's name out just here, where is he? He's in here somewhere. Romeo Paine, who was the who accompanied Columbus on his expedition there, realised that some of the natives kind of finally ground down tobacco and were sniffing it, basically. So, basically it was the Taino Indians were sniffing tobacco through Y-shaped tubes. Then in 1561, Dr. Jean Nicot, the French ambassador in Lisbon, sent some tobacco to the, Catherine de Medici, who at the time was the French queen. She powdered the leaf herself, who gave it to her son, who suffered from chronic migraines. The snuff was very successful in stopping his migraines and became very popular for medicines and things like that. By the 17th century, snuff had become a very, very big part of European culture. In 1620, the first snuff factory was established in Seville, Spain. In 1644, snuff was introduced to China for medical reasons. In 1660, King Charles II introduced it to England. 1675, snuff arrives in Germany. In Russia, tobacco products were heavily banned, heavily restricted. Snuff takers should have their nose cut off on the first offence, while cigarette smokers had their lips split. Sorry, that was for the second offence. First offence would be... I'm sorry. I'll start that again. Basically, in Russia, the first offence for a snuff taker was to have your nose cut off. Cigarette smokers had their lips slit and was whipped. And then for the second offence, you was executed. So if we think our tobacco control laws are bad now, thank God we didn't live in 17th century Russia. In 1730, the first American tobacco factories began in Virginia, with a few small snuff mills as well as the main tobacco factories. Snuff became popular in the UK. Predominantly it was popular in the UK because there was a battle took place between the English and the Spanish in 1702 near a place called Viga. Basically a load of Spanish galleons were seized, and a lot of the tobacco which was being carried by the Spaniards was seized, taken and illegally imported into the UK. Now, for you to know that this was from one of the ships taking it to some of the Seville factories, the word Spanish had been reduced to SP, so it instantly wasn't noticeable. Obviously over time people realised this, but just so that you know, that's where SP comes from. It's one of the early forms of Spanish snuff. Here we go. By the 19th century, snuff was still very popular throughout Europe, although England began to frown upon its use. Basically, people who couldn't smoke, such as judges, doctors, lawyers, things like that, who didn't want to be seen as smoking, generally tended to take snuff. So it was still very much a big part of society. It still is now, but gradually from the 19th century onwards, it all dwindled down, and smoking, pipe smoking, cigar smoking, and later cigarette smoking became a lot more popular. A few more little bits of information for you. Typical nasal snuff is only made up from a very select number of ingredients of very, very good tobacco, with flavourings that can be essences, oils, herbs, spices, and it's made with water. So a very, very crude kind of explanation of the production method is the tobaccos are left to mature and to dry out. They are then ground down into either a coarse, a medium, fine, or now we have toasted, which is an even finer form of snuff. It is then sieved to ensure there's no big thits are left in. The oils and the fragrances are added, and then it's left to mature, and a little bit more moisture can be added at this point for if you want a dry, a medium moist, or a very, very wet sort of mixture. So that's a quick overview of an article I wrote. I've got a few more little bits of information that I thought you may be interested in. This is coming from the Encyclopedia of Smoking and Tobacco, which is this book just here. I picked this up off eBay for a couple of quid. Now, here we go. There is a large feature on snuff inside this. Snuff is powdered tobacco that's sniffed into the nostrils or held against the lip. I'll come on to dip in a moment. At the moment I'm talking about English European snuffs. There's a big difference to the way you use them. I know quite a few people in the States call these nasal snuffs. In the UK it's just snuff, but there is a big difference between nasal and dipping. But again, I'll come back to that in a moment. It was very fashionable. It's pulverised and perfumed and inserted into the nostrils in pinchers, and any excess is removed with a tiny snuff spoon. The very early forms of snuff was very, very crude. It was made by grating tobacco. Later on, snuff mills began to sort of start grinding these down much finer. Snuff making was a thriving business in Western Europe. Glasgow in Scotland was one of the homes of snuff for a long time. It was made using imported snuffs from Virginia. Scottish snuff tended to be dry and strong and virtually unflavoured, and a very, very fine snuff. You have Macaboy snuff, which was moist and heavily scented. You have Rapis, which is basically sort of a French grated snuff, often known as Swedish snuff. It was grated to a coarse consistency. Basically, a snuff seller in 1740 had a price list of 18 different kinds of Rapis. I mean, basically, there's unbelievable amount of flavourings out there now. Gowerth and Hogarth, Samuel Gowerth and Wilson's of Sharrow, some of the oldest snuff manufacturers still producing snuffs in the UK. Tock or Toke, reasonably young guys to this, they do the more unusual flavours, but again, we'll come on to that in a moment. Basically, what was considered as some of the best quality snuffs they were was Seville and Spanish snuffs. These were all known as Havana leaf and are otherwise often known as musty snuffs. Basically, like I say, it's just a very, very old form. It contains nicotine. Round parts of the UK where I'm from a mining town, going back to the reason people use snuff. And predominantly, nearly all of my family worked down the pit. My dad worked down the pit, my granddad worked down the pit, my mum's uncles all worked down the pit. A lot of them died down the pits as well, to be honest, but a lot of people up through the central parts of the UK, the coal belts and things like that, they use snuff a lot. I say if you're down in a pit for 8-9 hours a day, you can't smoke, you can't do anything like that, so people either take snuff or they chew a bit of twist, and it's very, very popular around these parts. It's kind of, it gives you the hit of nicotine. If you've got a cold, medicated snuffs are fantastic. Again, I did some videos on medicated snuffs a couple of months ago when I had a cold. It might have even been a good couple of months ago, sort of thing. Again, I'll stick a description of that, a link to that in the description at the bottom. But I say a lot of people take snuff because you're not smoking, you're just inhaling. It gives you the hit of nicotine. You get some lovely, fruity, fragrant aromas from it. A lot of menthols and other kind of eucalyptus oils and things like that are used to unblock, open up the sinuses, allow you to breathe better. But yeah, so that's just a very, very, very crude video on me going through snuff and the history, the styles, the use and things like that. I hope you all found it quite informative. If you do want any more information, like I say, there's a load of links on my blog. I'll put a load more information in the descriptions at the bottom. And I hope this answers some of your questions. And I can now wrap this video up and answer this phone, because I'm assuming it's somebody who actually wants to speak to me. That's why it's still ringing. So, like I say, I'll be back in a bit with a few more reviews. So take care, boys and girls. See you later. Goodbye.